Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 66, with today's guest, Judy Robinette.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
I'm Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. And today's guest, Judy Robinette, will be introduced to you shortly. But let me just say that you will be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. This podcast is brought to you by our book, also called Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus marketing templates that go with it. So you can get your hands on those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now today's guest, Judy Robinette, is the author of the book called How to Be a Power Connector, the 5 plus 50 plus 100 rule for turning your business network into profits. We'll explore the concept of that 5 plus 50 plus 100 rule in the interview. And that book was actually named one of the top 10 business books for 2014. And she's widely recognized on Forbes and also Inc. as being one of the top connecting people, one of the top networkers in the world. So it was a real thrill to have her on the show. And it's amazing how these types of relationships come about, as you'll discover in the show. But she was actually attending one of the webinars that I was hosting for Lewis Howes, and we got chatting in the chat room, and that's how we first got to meet each other. So you'll find out more about that in the show. Let's kick things off. It's Adam Franklin here, and on the line, I'm very pleased to be joined by Judy Robinette. How are you, Judy?
I'm good, thank you.
Now, whereabouts are you joining me from today?
Idaho.
Idaho. Well, a very big welcome from Brisbane, which is where I'm at currently. Now, I've given you a big introduction in the pre-show talk, but you're the author of the book, How to Become a Power Connector, the 5 plus 50 plus 100 rule. Now, we'll dive into that shortly, but I gather you were quite shy growing up. Can you talk us through the early part of your journey, Judy?
Sure. So, when I was a kid, I was really shy, and I'd been bullied in school, and I didn't know anyone of wealth or influence or power. And Adam, even if I had, I wouldn't have dared to ask him for help or for anything else. And so I'm probably the last person on the planet you would have thought of ever write a book that had anything to do with networking.
And fast forward to today, you've just come back from an incredible experience. Can you share a bit more about that?
So I just got back from Midland, Odessa, Texas, and Dr. Bose listened to me on a podcast and then reached out to me on LinkedIn, asked me if I would fly to Texas and be interviewed by him on his CBS show. And so that was very exciting. And actually, the book has just opened amazing doors. I get emails from people all over the world. So many opportunities have come my way. I've been asked to do some training with Sandia Labs. I do platform presentations, big webinars with Monster.com. And my whole goal is just to change people's lives a bit so they see that all the resources they need are really here. There's 7 billion people on the planet. The global private wealth projected by Credit Suisse by 2019 is $369 trillion. There's countless opportunities. There's so much information. It doubles every 6 months. And those are really the building blocks that it takes. And so all of those things, all of those kind of opportunities are attached to people. And it took me a long time to learn. And I'll just tell you, so when I was in the corporate world, I had my head down, working really hard, and I, kind of peeked up and noticed that there were other people that were doing a lot better than I was. Even though they weren't working any harder, they didn't seem to be any smarter. And that's when I realized how critical it was to do strategic networking.
And even in today's world, does the 6 degrees of separation still apply, do you feel?
Yes, and I think the research now shows it's actually less than that, but, absolutely. And just as an example, when I finished doing the TV shoot, I went to the local Barnes & Noble bookstore just to kind of relax, and I'd taken a friend with, and we decided we'd like to go to a really good Mexican restaurant, and so there were two nice ladies that I looked at off and on in the cafe, and I went up and asked if they were locals, and they said they were, and I said, could you recommend a restaurant? And they did, and found out the one woman runs a very large foundation in the state of Texas. Her name is Jamie Owen, and she actually snuck over to the restaurant that she recommended and paid for our dinner. Well, then when I land in Vegas, I'm getting my shoes shined. And there's a woman that comes up, and sure enough, she's in cowboy boots. And I said, oh my gosh, you must be from Texas. That's just where I was at. And she said, yes, I was in Midland. And I said, you don't perchance know Jamie Owen, do you? And she said, absolutely. and so, it is fascinating. If you just talk to strangers, often you find that you're, oddly connected very quickly.
And that's something that you did. You forced yourself to get into that habit of talking to strangers in bank queues and supermarket queues, right, to overcome that difficulty of talking to people.
Yeah, I was so scared. And, in corporate events, I used to hate those, and I would hide out in the corners or over by the food, table, and I would come late and I would leave early. And I finally picked up the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it said, smile at people, say hello. And I started doing that, and I found to my dismay, people talked to me and liked me.
Wow,
and, yeah. and then, then that kind of emboldens you to get a little better at it. And finally, I made it a game to see if I could talk to anybody regardless. And again, I was with another friend in a car at a restaurant, and there was a car that was pulling up, and I said, I'm going to figure out a way to talk to these people. And when they got out, I noticed their license plates were, and I said, geez, I've lived in Idaho. Where are you from? And I ended up in a very nice, 5-minute conversation. And I learned from literally practicing, kind of forcing my way into it. And now it's second nature to me. I make it a point of smiling at people, saying hello, even just, in the airport, anywhere. Doesn't necessarily have to end up with an opportunity or a great conversation. But if you do that, the research shows we only talk to strangers 2 to 3% of our time. And that's really sad because the people that you already know, all of you know the same opportunities, everything. And so you have to get out to weak links, and you literally need to talk to strangers because all around you swirling are opportunities, everything that you need.
Oh, that's so true, and I'm fascinated because the way we met, not even in person, but the way we connected in real time was we were both on the same webinar. You attended the webinar I did with Lewis Howes, and we got chatting in the chat room.
Yep.
So I just thought, wow. And then I Googled you, and you said you'd done this book, and it was phenomenal. So it just does go to show that chatting to people wherever, even if it's in a webinar chat room, can just be so beneficial. The people you meet is just incredible.
And your stuff, Adam, is phenomenal. And I have sent your, marketing, social media, marketing strategy to numerous people. And see, my life would have not been as rich if I had not, just on that chat room, just said a couple of comments while we were on the webinar.
It is really amazing. And I appreciate you forwarding our material on, Judy. Thank you.
You bet.
So you talk about speaking to people in person. How does that equate to the online world? Because a lot of my listeners are in Australia. We're a long way from you in America. But we still have people obviously in supermarket queues. But how do we learn those skills of chatting to strangers and forming networks in an online world as opposed to purely face-to-face at events and just around the traps? Do the rules still apply, or are there a different set of considerations
Absolutely.
that we need to factor in?
The rules still apply. And, my favorite platforms are LinkedIn. There's 350 million professionals, and their goal is to network. And also Twitter. And I've found many strangers on Twitter and just reached out and said, geez, I really like the content that you're tweeting. Would love to talk to you. And that has ended up in some really good quality relationships for me. The woman that I hired, Jennifer Abernathy, who's written a couple of books on social media marketing, does my social media. When I was meeting with Gina Davis, she was trying to figure out how to up her strategy in that area. And so I called Jennifer on the phone and said, "Do you want to fly to Park City and come meet Gina Davis?" And she was stunned. And that was the first time we met. And so what has happened is these platforms give you unbelievable access that you've never had before. And it doesn't matter whether you're trying to connect to reporters at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. If you follow people, you can tell a whole lot about them by what they tweet or what's on their LinkedIn profile. And I will often, write to someone and say, "Hey, you've got an impressive profile. I notice you're doing this and this. This is what I'm about. This is what I'm doing. Could I ask you a couple of questions?" And Adam, in my book, one of the tools that I teach, and it's profound, is you share a little bit about your story, and then you ask what I call the 2 golden questions. And number 1 is, what other ideas do you have for me? And number 2 is, who else do you know I should talk to? And that works superb. It doesn't matter whether it's the online or the offline world. But certainly, do approach people. They wouldn't be on Twitter if they didn't want to hear from other people. And LinkedIn likewise.
And then what's the fine balance between being helpful and being annoying?
I haven't had many people be annoying. I think if you ask appropriately, and so that's kind of a skill also. And I tell people, you've got to date first before you go to bed. It's good to focus on developing a relationship. And people always connect first personally rather than professionally. So I, for one, just hate elevator speeches. I would rather you said, "Hey, Judy, I live in Brisbane, Australia. Have you ever been here?" Or, whatever. People, there's gazillions of lawyers, every kind, shape, color of whatever it is you're looking for. But you always start with a personal connection. And if you don't hear back from people, then that you can allow them to opt out. You just say next and find another person. So I don't think you have to worry so much about being annoying if you focus on, they've shown that studies show that you judge 2 things very quickly when you meet a stranger. Number 1 is that person caring. And that's why smiling, saying hello, and if you're online, acknowledging something personal really works. And then the second is they're looking for your level of competence.
Cool. Very, very useful. Now, can we talk through the concept of your 5 plus 50 plus 100? So you've got your top 5, your key 50, and your vital 100. Can you talk us through that, please, Judy?
Sure. So that concept came up with what is called Dunford's Law, which is groups fall apart at 150. And so I see people all the time, and they're out collecting gazillions of people on Facebook or LinkedIn. And those people will never be able to really help you, many of them. You want people that will have your back and have your future. And you can't really do more than 150 people, probably. I had a guy contact me and he said, "I've got a Google Doc and I've got 40,000 people and I'm sending them, birthday announcements and Christmas cards." And I said, "Well, how many have really helped you?" And it turned out it was less than 20, 25 people. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of my maximum number, although on average, everyone knows, Pew Research shows that we know on average 632 people. Now, relationship science also shows that our core group tends to be 5 to 15 people. And this is our close family and our friends. And this is really love and support capital. And then that next level out of 50 that is so important is those people who you're not so closely tied to, because again, the research shows weak links give you more success professionally, help you find jobs, help you find funding. But I try to have people develop that 50 group into being robust, meaning they'll return your calls. You've got a good enough relationship with them that they have integrity. They'll do a favor for you, return phone calls. And also deep, meaning people that have leadership and gravitas, some influence. And then finally wide, which is both geographically wide and also across different industries. I learned that accidentally when I worked in a town of about 50,000 people. And I was writing a column for just the small local newspaper on business. I was on a hospital board of directors. My neighbor was a senator for the state of Idaho. And I found myself in a really interesting position of being able to get anything done, to make things happen. It was like pretty powerful. And that's why in the title of my book, it's How to Be a Power Connector. And the power is the power to make things happen for yourself and others. And so if I had connections to the media and to the government, to money, to some of the most influential people in town, it was amazing what I could do just with a handful of people. So that really is that 50. And it's really only 25 to 50 people that you can make anything happen.
And then so the vital 100, is that made up of people you'd like to get to know, or is it a different type of person?
It's kind of opt-in. So Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's business partner, says that out of 100 people that he meets, 5 are keepers, 20 he never sees to care again as long as he lives. and the rest are kind of opt-in. And, you can meet someone and, you say, we'll get in touch or I'll send you a report or whatever. Well, you kind of test and see, do they get back to you? Do they keep their word, keep their promises? And if not, you don't want them in your network. So you're doing a little bit of assessment as to their character and their competence, because your social capital is vital to your success. Research shows study after study that your network equals your net worth. And so that's kind of a circle, and that, people can come and go kind of in that circle, and then pretty soon, they can come down into your circle of 50.
I see. And a lot of this you've spoken in the book is a strategic move. So is there some point where you're basically assessing these people and saying, do I think I can help you? Do I feel that there's a mutually beneficial relationship that could eventuate, and focusing more attention on those types of people?
Yeah. So, just out of the blue, it can occur to me, like, the young woman who wrote to me and said she had 27 million people in her network on LinkedIn, and she's kind of interested in the same thing you are. Well, geez, you're both in Australia. So I made that introduction. And I do that often with people. I will make introductions because it's important to me that I help people, if I can, get to where their goals are. And so I do this a lot, and it's a really good thing to learn. Just make a couple of introductions a week to people, and then you kind of become the go-to person, and you'll be amazed. People will thank you. And if it's people that you know, then you've already done the vetting process. You know them, like them, trust them at some level, and it's almost a gift. And the other people see it as a gift.
It almost seems to be the secret of networking is being that broker of relationships and that connector of people, yes, as opposed to necessarily, I think maybe it's true, a misconception that networking is all about trying to get the most for yourself, which probably leads to the negative connotations with networking. But the real value seems to be just adding value to other people without expecting anything in return, and the good things happen from that.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I can just tell you, I still pinch myself. So last week, the Assistant General Secretary of the United Nations read my book and invited me to come to a reception. And I went to that reception, and, it was a big deal to me. I've never been to the United Nations. And that night, after I got home, I got a text from somebody that I had not met but had interacted with a bit. And he invited me to Super Agent Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party, a private party. So I got on a jet, flew to Phoenix, and went to a Super Bowl party. And that happened just because I went out of my way just to provide some information to the one man, and then the other man had read my book. And so I find out that if you just go out of your way to help, and it can be as simple as being supportive and listening, which is a gift, and also sharing key information or trends. And then if I, for instance, when, I got your excellent information, and then I look at it and I think, how can I help Adam, literally, and start sending your information out to people. So you can, certainly share information trends. I curate information from like the Harvard Business Review or McKinsey, just a few things. Quartz.com is my favorite daily kind of news report that, comes to me in my email. And I'll find something that, maybe is the latest trend in social media or whatever. And I probably have about 5 people that are like you, Adam, that I feel that, this would be valuable for you, that I let you know. And so it's as simple even as sharing information. If you think about it, the critical resources are really access to people, it's money, ideas. And, I call it kind of playing a 3D chess. So my formula is really simply quality relationships plus strategy to a specific goal. So, if you're clear on what your goal is, then you can figure out what's the best room for you to get in. So most people are in the wrong room. They're wasting time. They're going to the same networking events with all their buddies and then wondering why they're not getting, what they need, whether it's a job, a career move, clients, whatever.
Okay. So sharing information to the right people and helping them out is what really works well. So let's dive into a bit more about the bad stuff, like what fails for people. So going to the same networking events with their buddies and not really branching out. What are some other things that people either do that's wrong or that they're doing that they actually think is a good networking strategy but it's actually flawed?
I think showing up at a networking meeting and, you're running around with business cards is very flawed, or just using an elevator pitch because you come across really robotic, like you're a robot. You're not a real human. You need to really focus on personal relationship first. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people don't utilize the network they have. And all of us have got a network. And I mean, this is everybody from your doctor to your barber to, professors you had in college to work colleagues to your neighbors to people in your family. And it's incredible to me. I say you make sure you start with the network you've got. Just pick 10 to 15 people. And go to them and say, this is my goal for 2015. I need to get to A, B, and C. What other ideas do you have for me? Who else do you know I should talk to? And it's dazzling when you do that because on average, everybody knows 632 people. And you're always surprised at who these people know. And I'll give you an example. This happens to me every week. Someone will get a hold of me. And a few months ago, my agent, Wendy Keller, called me on the phone and she said, I've been friends with this guy named Mike Muni. He built and sold Act software for $48 million. He has probably one of the top apps that's free for contacts called Viper. And I think the two of you should talk. Well, we hit it off and he flew to Salt Lake. And we're sitting and talking and I said, Mike, I've never heard of your app. What kind of marketing are you doing? And he told me, and then he looked kind of sad, and he said, Judy, if I could just get an article in Success Magazine. And I looked at him and I said, Mike, when you go home, I want you to call my agent, who I've known for 6 months, who you've known for many years. Her friend is Darren Hardy, who's the publisher and owner of Success Magazine. And he literally almost fell off his chair. And this happens to me all the time. And so often, I would bet 95% of the time the answer you need's already in the network you have. And so be aware of your network and start, talking to them, sharing your story, and then asking those questions. Join a powerful organization. That's another to do. And it can even be a volunteer. So here in Utah, I volunteered to be on the governor's finance committee. And just over a period of 2 to 3 months, I rubbed shoulders with 2 to 3 billionaires, countless, politicians, people who were serial entrepreneurs, people I would not have met if I was just, going to the local meetings. So joining what I call a powerful organization. So that is getting in a right room. That is with people who are smarter than you or have access to resources that you need to reach your goal. So that's another one. So, mind the network you've got, join a powerful organization. Those are really key. And then, toss the elevator speech. Be you, be real, be authentic.
Okay, so if you were starting your network, so you'd cultivate the one that you've got, what are some tactics for doing so? Like you say, share your story. Do you literally call people up and your friends and family and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and you ask those questions of people, or is that too basic?
Yeah, that works. And one of the things that you can say is, I read this book on strategic networking, and it occurred to me that I've got all of these contacts who care about me. And you're in my friends and family group, and I'd like to just share with you what I'm doing for 2015 and get some advice and see if you have any connections that could possibly help me.
Nice.
And, most people will say, sure, you should have asked. As a matter of fact, I was at a meeting in New York with 3 attorneys, kind of high-powered attorneys, who I said to them, what is your goal? And the one said, I'd like to serve on a committee with the SEC. The other one, who was sitting by her, kind of looked up and said, well, why didn't you tell me? I'm friends with the commissioners. So, Oh, and then another good one, and this one was also with attorneys. This one woman had wondered for years why this woman never sent her any clients, any business. And she knew she was competent, and they'd been friends. And so they're in the hot tub one night drinking a glass of wine. And the woman says to the other one, I've always wondered why you didn't ever send me any clients. And she said, well, you never asked. I didn't think you needed any.
So the ask is just so important.
It is. And it can be simple as, 3 powerful words, Adam, please help me.
Because I think that's often where people, I've certainly struggled, is knowing the fine line between actually leaning on people for help and feeling like you're going about it in a way, because it's so much more comfortable to be helping people, to say, hey, I think you should talk to this person, or this is an opportunity that will probably interest you, or even here's an article that I found on the Harvard Business Review that you might find interesting. It's a giving situation. And I think when the tables turn and it's then, I have to ask for something now, I've got to impose on this person and get something from them, that all of a sudden we feel selfish, or that maybe we haven't invested enough social capital to be in a position to ask. So I think I certainly feel that can hold people back. Are there any tips you've got for overcoming that type of resistance?
Yeah, there is. There is. And honestly, I felt that way a long time. And I think it has to do with self-worth and fear. I mean, many people, they're taught as children that strangers are dangerous. And also studies show that if you're raised lower to even kind of the middle class, you're taught to keep your head down, work hard, and don't ask anyone for any help. And the truth is, humans are wired to help each other. And the majority of people on the planet are good human beings and would love to help. And that's another one that you learn very quickly when you start putting yourself out there, is people are delighted to help. And what ends up happening is, they learn something new. I mean, when people call me about getting their company funded or whatever, I have to go through their executive summary, but I always learn something. So it's always a value creating thing. And, particularly people that are older, that have wisdom, they know it's time for them to give back. So most of us absolutely love to help. And something that will help with self-esteem, and I read this research a long time ago, is called a victory log. And you just take a piece of paper and you number from 1 to 50 things that you're proud that you've accomplished, and you review that thing daily. Because most of us keep going over and over in our head with our problems and bad things that have happened to us. And they've shown that really increases your self-esteem. But I would tell people that exactly what we're talking about is an assumption that you need to question, because it's wrong. Most people will help you.
That's actually reminded me, because in the early days, and ever since Toby and I started Blue Wire, which was over 10 years ago, now we went into it not knowing much about business or anything, so we knew we needed mentors. And so we asked a handful of people that we identified in our network at the time that had achieved what we would like to one day achieve. And we were amazed when they said yes. And we could go into their office or meet them for a coffee or go into their homes and ask them these questions. And they were more than willing to share all this amazing knowledge with us. And we'd simply asked, and we thought, well, the worst they can say is no. But just about every single person has said yes, and we've maintained relationships with these mentors and attracted a few more mentors over the years too. And it really just went to show to us that, particularly even people, higher up on that aspirational list of people you'd like to get to know, often the more successful they are, the more humble and the more accessible they seem to be, at least in my limited experience. And very, very willing to give back. And a lot of the time I said, well, we had mentors when we were starting out our business. And, to be honest, you're one of the few people that have actually asked us. So it's not like they had 10 people a day calling them up saying, can you be our mentor? For the most part anyway. It was just us coming out of the blue as these two young kids who were just keen to give it a go. And thankfully, we're very, very grateful, every day for their advice, because over the years, I mean, Toby and I couldn't have kept the business going without their input, and at various stages when it's been tough times, they've really helped us through those. So it's absolutely phenomenal what can actually happen with just a question.
Yeah, just a conversation. I mean, it all starts with a conversation. So, good for you.
Now, obviously, and I've explained this in the pre-show, Judy, but, you're on the Forbes list and the Inc. list of power networkers, and yet you started, striking up conversations with people in supermarkets and what have you. How much has your strategy and confidence and your approach, I guess, changed? Is it the same technique that you've just used all the way through, or have you done things that are now a lot more advanced in terms of your ability to connect with people and form those relationships?
I don't know that my techniques have changed a whole lot. I mean, I got bolder, so I dared approach, I think I have several billionaires in my Rolodex. When I was younger, I was shocked when I met my first millionaire. And then I kind of got over that. And then I was shocked when I met my first, billionaire. But one thing that I have done, and a lot of this is in my book, is, people started following me around and saying they'd pay me if I teach them how to network. And I thought they were nuts, because I saw myself as shy. And I didn't realize that I really did anything different than other people. And then I really started paying attention. And so people will say to me, well, how do you talk to strangers? And I started noticing a pattern, and it's one of two things. I either ask a question or a compliment. And those are kind of the two things that I do there. And it's actually pretty simple. Like on a LinkedIn, if someone writes to me or asks to connect, I will go look at their profile, and I will literally read between the lines. And I will write back, hi, Adam, thanks so much for connecting with me. Your profile is impressive. I looked at what you're doing with social media. And then I'll write 2 or 3 things that might have something to do with what I'm doing. And I always make sure that I use the person's name twice, at least in an email, that I connect with them on some kind of a personal level. Like I wrote to a fellow in Nigeria the other day, and, I noticed that he loved playing tennis. And so I commented that I used to love playing tennis and had kind of a wicked backhand at the time. And then I always end my emails, and this is something new, happy to help, because I'm signaling to other people, I'm approachable, I'm friendly, and I will help. And so, everything you do says who you are. And so some of those things might be considered, I don't know that they would be considered advanced techniques, but I've kind of got a pattern now that I do. And it comes from, being generous, making sure that I acknowledge this person, respect them as a human being. I use their name, comment honorably or authentically, I guess, on something about them and their profile. And the same thing with Twitter. I mean, you can look at people's tweets and figure out a whole lot about who they are because of who they pay attention to, what kind of content they're tweeting.
And what sort of questions would you do? Is it like really low-level chit-chatty type questions, like how's the weather? Or
sometimes I do the weather. If I really do want to know the weather, like when I was going to Texas, I actually wrote to someone and said, hey, I'm going to Texas. What's the weather like? Or any advice. And so I make sure that it is something that's relevant. If it's somebody that has a level of expertise in something that I would like, I would say, I'm trying to learn how to do this. I'm at this level. When I did my book, I knew nothing about book marketing and publishing. And after I signed the contract, my agent said to me, well, now you've got to build a platform. And I was so naive. I said, what's a platform? And I didn't know anybody in media at all. And I was so tickled. The first person that actually interviewed me for a blog, that I made a batch of homemade fudge and I sent it to her. And she called me on the phone. She said, most people don't even say thank you, let alone, send me some fudge. And so then I did more blogs, and I found out, that simple thing of sending someone some homemade candy resulted in that woman giving me to 3 other top writers. And then pretty soon, I got my first TV gig. And so I just started saying to people, and it was honest, I've never done this before. I'm trying to get the message out on my book. after I hit the Inc. list last year, then I decided, I'd be brave and I would try to go for the New York Times bestseller list. So I've been saying to people, my goal for 2015, do you have any other ideas for me? Or do you know anyone I should talk to? And, it works splendidly.
Awesome. And Judy, who do you learn from, either in person as mentors or as people whose books you read? But who are the people that you learn from?
So I'm a voracious learner. I love to read. I love to learn. I admire Oprah. She is somebody I've learned a great deal from watching, like Maya Angelou. So one of my goals has always been to acquire wisdom. And I read somewhere, because human behavior has often baffled me, that the only way to understand human behavior is to read the Bible or Shakespeare. So, a book I've been reading lately is How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare, which has been fun, and I've learned a ton. I certainly admire people like Jack Canfield, Peter Drucker, some of the business influential kinds of folks. But I try to find people that have what I consider a good head, a good heart, and a good gut, and really pay attention. I like Richard Branson, really admire Warren Buffett, somebody that does deals on a handshake.
And are there any closing thoughts or final pieces of advice that you'd like to get off your chest before we close the interview, Judy?
Yeah, I would suggest to people to write down their network equals their net worth, to make sure that they share their story, ask those 2 golden questions. Certainly reach out to me if you've got any questions. You can find me on the web, find me on LinkedIn, or find me on Twitter. And, get out of your comfort zone. So there's actually, I read this in a book called Playing Big, I think, or Playing Bigger. And it said that in Hebrew, there's actually 2 words for fear. And one of them means the dangerous kind of life-threatening when your brain goes to lizard mode. But the second type is when you're stretching, you're going out of your box, out of your comfort zone, and that you should embrace that. And so I would challenge everyone that's listening to map out the network that you already have and to look for gaps that you need to fill, and then look for some connections that you could make for people. And, just do a couple of these things, and it will have a profound impact on the trajectory of your success in life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the book is How to Be a Power Connector by Judy Robinette. That's on Amazon and Kindle and everywhere else. So the website's www.judyrobinette.com. Is that correct? For listeners? Correct. Yep, perfect.
Yes.
And Twitter at Judy Robinette?
Yeah, no E on the end of Robinette.
So 2 T's at the end, Robinett. Thank you so much for joining us on the call, Judy. You've shared a lot of valuable nuggets of information with our listeners, and I'm sure they're all as appreciative as I am. So have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to catching up with you again.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for my chat with Judy Robinette. I was furiously taking notes during that interview. So let me just recap on some of the things that I got out of it. I really liked how she started off just striking up conversations with strangers, no matter where she was, and just simply leading into the question that she actually wanted, was genuinely interested in, and also just complimenting the person as the 2 conversation starters. And, if you're sitting next to someone on the bus or on an aeroplane, I know in the book she actually says she makes a point of introducing herself to everybody who she sits next to on planes. And I think just getting into that habit of just saying hello can be so valuable. And I've tried to start getting in the habit of doing that online as well. If I read an article that I particularly like, I'll try and tweet to the author, or maybe go check out their website and drop them a line if they've got a contact form or their email address on there. Really just to express my gratitude and say, I liked your article. And once you connect with all sorts of different people, you never know where those relationships will end up. But I do actually try to implement some of Judy's techniques of keeping a list of, basically adding people to a list. So instead of just reading a cool article and going, that was interesting, such and such was the author of that article, and forgetting about it, I make a note to just jot their name down into a Google spreadsheet so that I can just keep a list of all these interesting people that I've come across, and I will try to, I'm not perfect at it, but I'll try to actually contact them
and let them know that I enjoyed the article and have signed up to their newsletter or followed them on Twitter. And that can be the start of a relationship. And if I just keep an eye on those people, read their stuff, and eventually they might prove to be somebody really aligned to what I'm interested in and a very valuable business relationship. Judy's questions, particularly who else do you know that I should talk to, such a powerful thing to be adding onto any conversation that you have with somebody, and also just in the email, is there anyone else I should talk to? And I really liked how she signs off a lot of her emails with, I'm happy to help, signaling that she's actually approachable and that she is. Exactly as she says, she's happy to help. So I certainly find that a lot of people are, but I find that extra step of signaling to people a really nice touch on her emails. Anyway, so she was shy growing up and has learnt these skills, so we can all do it. We can do it in the online world, we can do it in the offline world. I do certainly recommend her book. We will link to that in the show notes, but How to Be a Power Connector. Look for it on Amazon or Kindle. I've been reading it and I really have enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to the show. The show was brought to you by our book called Web Marketing That Works and the bonus 33 marketing templates that go with it. You can download those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. My intent, as is Toby's, is to deliver actionable advice, so your feedback and questions are welcome. Please drop me a line at adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au or tweet me at franklin_adam. If you enjoyed this show, and I hope you did, I'd love it if you could leave us a review on iTunes, and I shall see you for the next show. Cheers.